Hey, Ty, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Nathan.
Thanks. So you're all set to podcast?
Yeah, I think so. Um,
Great. Uh, uh, did you? It looks like there's a little bit of smoke behind you. Did you know that?
yeah, it's fine. I'm still good to go. Don't worry. I mean, there's a little bit of a fire that's engulfing the entire house, but it's fine.
So you don't want to go and deal with that right now.
Nah, nah. I mean, I don't know. It's fine.
You can still podcast.
Yeah. I'll podcast, and then afterward, I'll probably try to do a little something about it.
All right. So we're just gonna put the fire on the back burner, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's where fire goes, right?
Good point. Good point. Hello and welcome to Woeful Wednesdays. Nathan reads a series of unfortunate events. Ignore the tattoo. My name is Nathan,
And I'm Tyler.
who is slowly suffocating to death. So, if you are new to this, we are reading through the entire series of A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, really Daniel Handler, and we are doing one video a week for each book. We're separating it into three different parts. So, chapters 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and then 9 to 13. And for this week, we are on book the 8th, The Hostel Hospital, and chapters 9 to 13.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, it's quite an ending. It goes at a breakneck speed, um, as this entire book has gone. But I do understand that we have a sponsor.
Yeah, we sure do. So, our sponsor for this week is Heimlich Haute Cuisine. It's all about ambiance when you're looking for a fine dining experience. Situated in a former operating theater, Heimlich Haute Cuisine has it all. Bring your date for a fancy night out on the town, and you're going to be decked out in a lab coat, and they're going to provide you with your scalpels, and it's just the perfect atmosphere for wining and dining, your romantic partner, or you could even bring the whole family, right? Why
Hmm.
not? It's
Yeah,
it's it's still got all of the things, right? Like each table has got a giant metal light overlooking a metal slab of a table, and
sounds fantastic. I honestly, I can't wait to check them out. I know that they did give us a little bit of a discount thanks to this sponsorship, and so definitely going to be checking that out sometime soon. Maybe get the haunch of ham or something. I don't know.
exactly, sure. I mean, it's the restaurant franchise that's sweeping the nation because there's so many former operating theaters
Yep.
and they just make for great dining experiences. So Heimlich Haute Cuisine is the place to go. Make your reservations today, folks.
Absolutely, you don't want to miss it, and they do fill up fast because there's not a lot of room in them for tables.
Right, exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, you, Tyler, maybe need to get out of there because I think that you're going to suffocate pretty soon.
No, I think I'm fine. It'll be fine. I'll just try to stay low in my chair. That'll
Perfect
help.
solution. That's
Yeah.
problem solving right there. All right, folks, I hope you enjoy. Ignore the tattoo! Nathan unfortunately reads a series of unfortunate events at an unfortunate age, which in this case is being used to indicate that he is entirely too old to be reading this for the first time. All right, so we were talking about chapters 9 to 13 in the hostel hospital. That's how we've decided to pronounce it, because I think that's probably, as you pointed out, that's probably what Handler would have wanted.
Yeah, yeah. Even though I think I do tend to read it as hostile,
Me
but
too, but yeah, trying to, I don't know, make it fit better together, sort of a slant rhyme,
yeah.
then we'll go with that. All right, so I have got plot summary duty for this week. So we're looking at chapters 9 to 13. Basically, we pick up where we left off at the end of chapter 8, where Violet has been taken by Olaf's cronies, and they're going to do a cranioectomy where they're going to cut off her head because a lot of diseases come from the head. So therefore, if you remove it, then that should solve some of those. And so Klaus and Sunny are in a closet, and he comes up with this idea that, Olaf has been rearranging the letters of his name to spell out different aliases, and that he's probably done the same thing with Violet. So then he gets Sunny to open up a can of the like alphabet soup to then use the noodles that are in the shapes of letters to be able to spell out her name. And then it really makes sure that we know exactly how this functions, just in case we, like, in cases like it's like a manual,
right,
of how to do this. It's
I will give it to Handler that he does actually address the fact that the letters are soggy and falling apart.
Yeah,
Because I
he
know that
does.
you had complained about that last week. Actually, both of us did, but
Right.
yeah.
And so anyway, they figure out that Violet has got to be patient Laura V. Bleediotti,
Mm-hmm.
and they go after her, and they disguise themselves in scrubs with, the mask, the surgical mask, and all of that. And then they see Esme, who doesn't recognize them, and then they meet up with, like, I guess, is it that she brings them into the room with Violet, where you've got the
Yes.
hook-handed man and the long-nosed dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they somehow just assume that Sonny and Klaus are
The
the
two
powder-faced.
pale-faced ladies.
Yeah. Somehow they mistook a baby who's not even really walking.
Disguises are very powerful in this
They
universe.
sure are. They sure are. And they are wheeling off Violet to the operating room, and they
Mhm.
hand Klaus that big toothy saw, which is where you get the cover of the book.
Mhm.
And they get into the operating theater, because it's one of those operating theaters where people can go in and watch this stuff happen.
Yeah.
And they stall for time, trying to wait for Violet to wake up.
Mhm.
And through a couple different, tactics, they're able to stall long enough, and they've got to then rush out of there. People start recognizing them as being the murderers, and so it's, Gadzooks, Scoob, let's get out of here. And then they
Right.
kind of run off. They end up in a closet again. Violet, despite the fact that she's all drugged up and groggy from the anesthetic, she's still able to invent, because she could probably do this with her arms behind her back. And
Right.
she invents a false intercom to create a diversion to get everybody to go off to the unfinished wing of the hospital, while at the same time knotting together a bunch of rubber bands to be able to get them out of the window while the entire hospital is on fire. Because I guess I missed that part, that the Library of Records is on fire
Right.
and the hospital is burning to the ground, and people are getting conflicting advice of whether they should go after the Baudelaires or whether they should escape.
Mhm.
And anyway, they escape out the window, and there's smoke all over. They're like, if we just run away, we're on the plains, people will see us, we have nowhere to hide. So I guess the only place that we can hide is going to be in the trunk of Olaf's car, underneath a bunch of these lab coats and, scrubs and all of that, with all of his henchmen. And
Mhm.
they do that, and they speed away to try to find out where he's going, because he's got to get those records, the other 12 files from the Baudelaire file, the other 12 pages from it,
Yeah.
because they only saw the 13th page, because he's got to destroy it, because for something significant that we don't know.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, and the Baudelaires do mention that this may be their only chance to figure out who potentially survived the fire and where they are.
Yes, exactly. All right.
Uh, yeah, all right. So I guess, do you want to go first for chapter
Sure.
9?
Sure. All right. So my first note is on page 155. It's an interesting section that we have here. This is a really long paragraph. It goes from 154 to 155. If you're looking at the top of 154, then you can see how this starts. It's Sunny grinned, showing all of her sharp teeth, and then swung her head down onto the can of soup, remembering the day she had learned to open cans all by herself. And then you get this long passage, and then on page 155, towards the bottom of that paragraph, it says, now, as the youngest Baudelaire bit along the edge of the can of alphabet soup, she wondered if one of her parents had really survived the fire, and if she dared get her hopes up just because of one sentence on page 13 of the Snicket file. Sonny wondered if the Baudelaire family would ever be together again, laughing and clapping and working together to make something sweet and delicious. So I just wrote down that this is more insight than we've ever had into Sonny's mind. We've never really had this moment where we get into her head other than she looked at that and said, ooh, that looks good to gnaw on. I would like to bite that. And
Right.
this is thinking about the family that was and worrying, and her psychology, her inner mind is becoming more complex here, and we're getting access to it, where we're seeing that she's developing in a lot of ways, intellectually and psychologically. She's maturing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting passage that he's doing that, because Sonny wondered if the Baudelaire family would ever be together again, laughing and clapping and working together to make something sweet and delicious. So, and even like wondering if her parents had really survived the fire. Like, I mean, it's fine. These books are not supposed to be realistic, but if I mean, I've talked to people where they had a parent or a grandparent who died at a really young age, and there's no pain there often. It's just I didn't know them. So, do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
If you know the parent and if you have a memory, then it's quite painful. But if you've never, like, if the last time you saw your parent, you were like a year old or 2 years old, then there's really not any pain there. Like, I mean, for instance, like with our grandparents on mom's side, then you, like, by the time you were born, then our grandma on our mom's side, she had already passed away, but I was like a little baby when she passed away. And there's some pictures of her holding me, but I don't have any memory. And it's not that I don't care for her, but when I think about that, I'm like, well, I have no memory at all. But our grandfather, on the other hand, I do have a memory of him, like good, strong memories. I used to visit him often. And so then that one, there's pain there, but there isn't. So I'm just saying it's interesting because it's like Sunny wouldn't wonder this. She wouldn't think this. There wouldn't be that kind of painful, like, oh, look at these, like this nostalgia that she has.
Right.
But
yeah, I think it's still. I don't think that Lemony Snicket has ever actually said how old Sunny is. But yeah, I mean, she just learned to walk, and I feel like he's rushing to be like, oh, I have to make her older. Whoops.
yeah, she's
And this is
just
one way of doing
just
that.
learning to walk, and she's still mostly pre-verbal. Like she's making, I mean, maybe not pre-verbal. I don't know. Look, I'm not a pediatrician, so I don't know the exact stages. But I'm saying like she's not speaking in full sentences, and most of the time it's still coming out as gibberish. So she's got to be under 2.
Right. Yeah.
Like, considering that she's like barely walking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just, I don't think that it's a bad thing. It's just it's an interesting thing, because before she kind of irritated me as a character, because it's just like the shallowest character ever of just how are you going to fit biting into this one that you have to give every single one of these kids a task, and Sunny has no useful skills and has nothing going on upstairs other than
Right.
So I'm kind of grateful that we're starting to get a little bit more, even if it's not realistic. I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all that I had for chapter 9.
All right. I have a couple notes. One is a really, really quick one, just at the very beginning of chapter 9 on page 151. Just the Lemony Snicket's description here. The word dumbfoundedly here means wondering why in the world Klaus wanted to eat alphabet soup at a time like this. My only thing is that dumbfounded means that you are lost for words, that you are not speaking. And that this is entirely the wrong word for this. Because she says something.
Yes. And that's where I feel like at times these books are controversial for other reasons than might be immediately apparent. It's not that they're controversial the way Snicket claims they are, because they're such dark themes. It's controversial because you are instructing children in this didactic way of this is what dumbfoundedly means. And it's like, no, it's not. What are you doing? Why are you teaching them the wrong word? And most kids are going to just take this at face value.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. I know they're going to catch a lot of the sarcasm, but stuff like that, because he so often gives the right definition, that when he gives the wrong one, there's not really anything that tips you off to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just asked dumbfoundedly is not a thing that
No,
should ever be written.
no, that's an oxymoron.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Or a contradiction or something.
Yeah.
It don't
Um,
make no sense.
that's a good way of putting it. All right, so I have one other note for chapter 9. Um, on page 162. Um, yeah, so uh, I guess a couple notes here. One thing, the children are congratulating each other again, and a little bit of lampshading as well, where it's like, oh, but before we congratulate ourselves, let's rescue our sister. And it's like, yes, stop, congratulating yourselves when you're in such a rush.
Right.
Um, and then, but the other note is that it is that she is in room 922, and I didn't realize immediately, but I did think about it, and that does equal 13.
Yes,
So
if you add it up, then it
yeah,
equals 13.
9 plus 2 plus 2.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't catch that, and you're absolutely right. And I'm sure that was intentional. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
All right, so yeah, those are my only notes for chapter 9.
All right, speeding ahead, chapter 10. I guess I'll go first with this one. I think I've only got one note for it. I do. So on page, what are you laughing about over there?
I'm sorry, yeah, I have one note for chapter 10 as well.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if it's the same thing.
Uh, all right, so this is, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be the same thing. It's about the butterflies in the stomach.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So this is page 172. Uh, so you get this like long description of, having like this false history. It's a false etymology of the phrase butterflies in your stomach.
Right. Yeah.
Like as though these people who were trying to capture this dude who had butterflies then swallowed them for safekeeping, and they fluttered around in his stomach. And yeah, that it's this false etymology, this false history of the word, and it's this incredibly verbose explanation of it, where it's I just wrote down that I like this. That's really all that I have. I'm like, okay, like that, because I did not exactly see where that was going initially.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Me neither. It's yeah, it's true. Um,
And I guess the other thing that I wanted to say with it, and then I want to get your comment, is that I remember when I first was told what the word, like when I first heard the phrase butterflies in your stomach, it was such an appropriate time to learn it. I was going to go on stage and perform, and I was a kid. It was a church play, but like we had hundreds of people in our church at the time, literally hundreds, like three,
mhm.
400 people. And I was nervous before I went on stage, and so my stomach felt funny. And then I said that to dad. And then he's like, oh, you just have butterflies in your stomach. And then I'm like, I do. Like, I was like, what is that? Because I was just a little kid. And then he like described it.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, that is probably what it would feel like because it's all fluttery and
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
tickles but uncomfortable. So this like literal history of it, of some dude did have butterflies in his stomach.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, as a kid that would be great to
Yeah,
to read this.
I learned it in the perfect way.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so my notes on this, for one thing, he had been in prison 4.5 times. What in the world does that mean? To
Maybe
be
he
in
was just in a
prison
holding
half the
cell
time?
for one of them,
Oh, okay.
or maybe he was in a jail but not a prison, right? Because you know the distinction.
I'm not quite sure what the distinction is, but
So the distinction is really simple. So a jail is temporary and it's typically at a police station, but a prison is long term.
okay.
So
Gotcha.
maybe because if you're just in jail, because like I've literally heard this from people who they'll say, I've never been to prison. Sure, I've been to jail a few times, but I've never been to prison. And and they don't say it facetiously. Like that's a very serious thing of like, I never got into serious trouble. Sure, I went to jail because I was like drunk or I punched a guy or whatever, but never anything where I had to be locked up for more than like a night or two. As if
Right.
that's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Oh man. Okay.
So I'm just
As
saying, once I started hearing that, then I went, oh, there is a distinction. Got it.
Okay. Yeah, as someone who has never really interacted with the police, then I'm just like, all right.
No, I know. Like it's like weird flex, but okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because then it does describe, during his fifth and final prison sentence. Um,
That's why I'm thinking maybe jail, because there
right,
are some people who would say, "Oh, like jail doesn't count as prison, so I've only
right,
been locked up 4.5 times." That's a
right.
half instance.
Yeah. Um, yeah, all right. So the other note here is Mr. Sirin. So I did look it up, and Mr. Sirin is a reference to Vladimir Nabokov,
Oh,
who, have you heard of him?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He's up there with Tolstoy. I don't
Right.
know many Russian writers, but Nabokov, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. Nabokov, then he did write under a pen name of Vladimir Sirin.
No
Um,
kidding. I didn't know
and
that.
he was actually an entomologist and, in fact, I forget what the word is for
Yeah, about
uh,
butterflies.
le, le, lepidopterist? Lepidopterist? I
Sure,
think.
I
Yeah,
think so. Lepidopterist.
yeah. So, yeah, just that is actually a good. I think that's one of the references that works really well. You have to work hard to find what it is.
Yes,
But once you
yes.
do, then you're like, oh, okay, that actually really works. The fact that he
Yes.
studied butterflies specifically and
It
he's part of this story.
it rewards readers who actually go and research it. That's
Mhm.
where I get angry is when I go, if you make a reference, but then there's no reward for me going off independently and researching that name and why
Yeah.
you made that reference. If there's nothing to it, then I'm like, then why did you make the reference? Why didn't you just use a regular name? Uh,
Yeah.
but that is I like that one. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was my only note. And yeah, I'm very impressed by that. By that connection there.
Yeah. Yeah,
All
me
right.
too. Okay.
Moving on to chapter 11.
Yeah. Why don't you go first with this one?
Sure. All right, so my first note is on page 192. Um, oh, yes. We get the reference of I am Dr. O. Lucafont. Oh, thank goodness. I felt so satisfied when I read that. I'm like, okay, good. It is
Right.
an actual proper
Anagram for Count
anagram. Yeah.
Olaf. Yeah.
Because I was so annoyed that it was like one letter off, and now I'm like, okay, there it is.
Yes. Yep. That makes
Uh,
sense.
yep. Actually, that was my only note for chapter 11.
Look at this. We're flying through these chapters, which is great. I've only got one note for chapter 11, which I've already commented on through our sponsor, which is this whole thing about operating theaters. It's a funny
Right.
little passage, right? So, an operating
Yeah.
theater's page 190. It's a large dark room in which doctors perform medical procedures. And if you're in the audience, the best thing to do is to leave at once because there's never anything on display in an operating theater but pain, suffering, and discomfort. And for this reason, most operating theaters have been closed down or have been turned into restaurants. Like, if you, oh my goodness, like I would if there was a restaurant that was housed in a former operating theater, I would just call it the vomitorium. Like, how gross is that, the idea?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it it reminds me of a tweet that I sent out. Oh man, I don't even know how long ago, but it was in reference to a uh, there was a new restaurant that was opening up, and it
mhm.
was on the site of a former adult video store. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to eat there. I know that it, doesn't have anything to do with it, but I'm still just, I don't know. It's weird.
It is strange. Yeah. I don't know why it matters when you know that it's no longer the former thing,
Yeah.
but I just feel like there's some, I don't know. Like,
I think it's the expression of if these walls could talk. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's it. And most of the time, then you can just ignore it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not you're not thinking about the history of a place most of the time.
Yeah.
And if you did want to know, you'd have to do a lot of work. But especially when it's like in the neighborhood or something like that, and you know exactly what it was, and then it turns into this other thing, and then you're just like, I know what that thing was.
Yeah.
That place has got some weird vibes or something.
Yeah, I had to pass it every day on my way to school, like on my way to university on the bus, and I was just like, ah. So then it was really weird when it like closed down. I was like, oh yay! And then it's like, yeah, it's gonna be a restaurant, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you like give somebody like directions to dinner, and Google Maps hasn't updated, and it's like, I want you to meet me here. This is the address. They're like, are you sure? Yeah, that's definitely where I want to meet you tonight. They're like, I think I'm busy. Meeting a boss there or something like that. Let's have a work meeting. A great new restaurant that just opened up. Here's the address.
Absolutely.
All right, and the other thing too that I liked with this operating theater thing is that like the literal treatment of the word, or the literal response to the word theater, the way they applaud as though it's a performance.
Right. Yeah.
It's so silly, but I do like that, because I don't know whoever came up with the idea of an operating theater. I mean, I get it for medical students. I understand and I appreciate that. But the idea of ever sitting in a room like that is just
like even on The Simpsons, you know, when like Homer is getting an operation and the family is sitting like in the operating theater watching. I'm like, why in the world would you want to be there for that?
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't understand. If you're related to the person or not, it's still weird to just be watching, unless, again, if you were a medical student. Totally
medical
understand.
Students, absolutely. But I don't know that they, like, if somebody can answer this for me, I'd be interested. Like, genuinely, did you have to prove that you were a resident, like doing your residency or an intern or something before getting into one of these things? Or did they have like psychopaths and serial killers sitting in there picking up tips on how to remove a liver? You know what I mean? Like, I just want to know, because what type of people besides people in the medical field would ever go into this? Like anybody who's outside of healthcare. But if it's just open to the public, there's no way you're getting, you know, nice ordinary people who just, it's my hobby, you know. I didn't want to go professional, so I dabble in it.
On an unrelated note, do you want to meet me in the back alley? And
Right, exactly. It just seems like a bad idea to open that up to just anyone. So if somebody could tell me how that actually worked, then I'd be interested. I don't want to be invited. I want to make that very clear.
Right.
I just want to know if they checked ID when you went in. You had to have some kind of credentials, or if it was just you could randomly wander in when you're visiting a sick relative. Is she in here? Ah!
Oh dear.
All right, chapter 12. I guess I'll go first. I just wanted to say, like, that's an interesting illustration that we get at the beginning of chapter 12, pages like 212 to 213. It's one of the more action oriented illustrations.
Yeah, that's true. Ordinarily,
get a lot of action shots.
Right. Yeah, for most of the series, and we tend to just be getting depictions of the setting.
Yeah.
Of, you know, specific things like, you know, foul fountain or something.
Exactly.
But yeah, in this, then they are actually running away. And the fact that they did use page, you said it's 212?
213 is where it really is. 212 has got a little bit with the surgical mask that's floated away because they're speeding so quickly.
Yeah, but I like that they have the surgical mask on page 212. I think that's a nice little detail.
It is, yeah. They're turning around and looking at it. It's a great use of space because you've got these blank pages, in case anybody forgets, and you get the blank pages if the chapter ends on, you know, on one of the odd number pages on the right hand side of the book. Yeah, I just thought that was worth pointing out.
Yeah,
that it stands out. Page 214 at the top of it. Then you get this reference to Lemony Snicket having a tattoo on his left ankle.
Yep.
So just, okay, more connections between him and Olaf.
Yeah. Still no idea what it means.
Exactly. I know. I have no comment other than, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's interesting that, that he has one. And
Right.
I guess that's a good way of, of introducing or explaining that he does have one, since
Yes.
he's not, doesn't appear to be actually part of the story.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then continuing on that page, and this is a totally separate note, but he says, as I sit in this very tiny room printing these words with this very large pencil, I feel as if my whole life has been nothing but a dismal play presented just for someone else's amusement, and that the playwright who invented my cruel twist of fate is somewhere far above me, laughing and laughing at his creation. So
Mhm.
this is a moment of metafiction that stands out because it's drawing attention to the fact that Snicket himself feels like a character in a play or really a character in a book, and that he has no agency in his own life, that somebody else is pulling the strings and that they're doing it for entertainment purposes. And it's essentially he's acting as a self-aware character going, wait, like, am I in something? Like, do I even exist, or is somebody controlling me, and am I just really a character in some play here?
Right.
And we've seen this so many different times in different pieces of fiction and film and television, where you have self-aware characters who are, in that awful position of questioning their own um, ontology, like the question of whether they, like the question of personhood, whether they exist. Because it's like, well, even if I am your creation, but I have thoughts and feelings, and this affects me. So when you put me into these crazy situations where there's tragedy, then I experience tragedy. And so
Hmm.
why would a writer put me into those things just for entertainment purposes? And this, like this breakdown of the real world and fiction, and how it's like, well, it's fictional characters, so we don't have to worry about them, that if they die or if awful things happen, but it's all fiction, it's all pretend. And then
Right.
just like somebody kind of crying out from inside the book saying, it's not pretend to me,
Yeah.
right? I'm
Yeah.
real and I don't like this. And so it stands out as this moment of metafiction.
Absolutely. Yeah. The fantastic thing about it is that these words being written by Lemony Snicket are actually being written by Daniel Handler, who is, of course, the playwright. Um, and he is writing a comedy series that
Yes,
is describing these terrible events that would be terrible for the characters in it. Um,
exactly.
yeah, the only other note that I have regarding that, and I do want to get to your other notes for this
Uh-huh.
chapter, but um, it's the idea of seeing, someone above him, his creator above him, is
Hmm.
an interesting kind of religious, symmetry or parallel that, again, we've talked before about how Lemony Snicket doesn't seem to be very religious, but in this, it seems to actually have issues with religion. But then in here, then we're getting this idea of a playwright being the creator,
Yes.
which is one interpretation of God or an eternal being. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, so I think that that's interesting that it is in there.
Yes, it is. It is. The other thing too, the more that I look at it, the more interesting it becomes, because he even then says that the playwright who invented my cruel twist of fate. That's a contradiction, because which one is it? Is it the playwright who's inventing these things, or is it a twist of
Mm,
fate? Because fate can't be controlled. That's the whole thing with fate.
right.
Like, so it really should read something like the playwright who invented what I perceive to be fate, but is really his
Mm,
like his own creation, his own fancy, right?
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
all right. Can we move on?
Yep.
Okay, page 215 towards the bottom of this. Then I'll just read that second paragraph, starting with the second sentence on there, where it says, This is Mattathias, the head of human resources, with an important announcement. There is a terrible fire in Heimlich Hospital. The fire was set in the Library of Records by the Baudelaire murderers and has spread to the sore throat ward, the stub toe ward, and the accidentally swallowed something you shouldn't have ward. And then it continues on. I finally caught it of what it is with all these like funny little wards that they have in the hospital. This is a children's idea of what a hospital is.
Right. Yes,
And
absolutely.
I don't mean like a 10-year-old who would be reading this book. I mean like a 4-year-old.
Right.
Like you explain to a 4-year-old
Yeah.
that like a family member's sick and they're like, like why does like a little kid go to the hospital typically, right? Most of the time, unless it's something awful like leukemia, right? Which is just awful. But most of the time then it's like I swallowed something I shouldn't have.
Right.
Or I have a sore throat.
Yeah.
I don't think a parent would take them for a stub toe. I hope not, because that is just a waste of the healthcare resources.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Like, but I guess a little kid might think I need to go to the hospital. It hurts so much. Ow, ow, ow. So I have to go to the hospital. But it's such a children's idea. There's no oncology ward.
Right.
There's not like pediatrics. You know what I mean? There's none of these things. There's not the maternity ward. There's not the psych ward. Like there's none of these like complex medical things. It's just the sore throat ward, the stub toe ward, the accidentally swallowed something you shouldn't have ward.
Right. Yeah, and I love that there are so many of these wards that are seemingly like, how often are these people injuring themselves in these ways? How many people have a sore throat that you need to build an entire ward for this?
And that's what I'm saying, that it's like what a children's idea of a hospital. If a child designed a hospital, that's what they would do. You tell them, well, there's different sections of hospital depending on what's wrong with you. And they're like the sore throat ward? Yeah, sure. Build one of those.
Yeah.
All right. And then the bottom of page 220, I think this is my last note for chapter 12. Then we again have got Klaus, who's got issues with killing somebody. So Klaus has got the knife, and he says, "Get back," Klaus cried. "This knife is very sharp. You can't kill all of us," the hook-handed man replied. "In fact, I doubt you have the courage to kill anyone." "It doesn't take courage to kill someone," Klaus said. "It takes a severe lack of moral stamina." And I just wrote down, no. This is not true at all. You think that it didn't take courage to go up against the Nazis in World War II? Like, who were committing genocide and were taking over Europe? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it absolutely takes courage to kill somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Murder, maybe, if you use the word murder.
That's what I was going to say.
But he didn't use the word murder.
Yeah, there should be a distinction between kill and murder, because there is one.
There is. It's a legal distinction. That killing is not necessarily murder. That if the state sanctions it effectively, then it's killing. And if not, then it's murder. If it's an illegal taking of somebody's life. But it actually, for many people to take a life, if you're doing that, especially in the instance where you are going to save innocent lives, that does take courage to do. And then to teach this, to make this emphatic statement of it, that I want to get it exactly right, where he says, "It doesn't take courage to kill someone. It takes a severe lack of moral stamina." Lack of moral stamina, as though you can do it for a certain period of time, but like you've got to have that moral stamina, that endurance, where it's like you want to kill, but no, you've got to not. Just hold out long enough until you die, where you put off that urge to kill. It's such a weird way of saying it. It's like he's trying to make it sound complex using these words. Like, I mean, I have students who do this all the time. It's like, I don't think those words like mean what you think they mean. You tried to sound intelligent, but it didn't work. That, I mean, like another example would be, I know that I don't think you've seen the film, but United 93, I'm pretty sure is the name of it, but it's based off of September 11th, when you had the terrorist who took over, and that was the fourth plane. And then the passengers managed to overtake the hijackers and attack them, and the plane went down, but they prevented who knows how many innocent lives. Even though, of course, everybody on the plane ended up dying. But you're telling me that to do that, it didn't take courage to kill them? It took a severe lack of moral stamina? No, it's the complete opposite of that. It
Yeah.
took an incredible amount of moral stamina to say, we need to do this, we need to do this, like, and then to continue to go through with it, to continue to plan and to say, we cannot sit here and allow this to happen.
Yeah.
And the moralizing in these books, especially from Klaus, where they won't kill Olaf, and it's like, then you want, by doing that, you're making a choice that more people will die, and you're on really shaky ethical ground if you've got that pacifist approach. And I'm not saying, like, I'm somebody who is very sympathetic to pacifism, and I've struggled with that because I want to be a pacifist, but I also feel like, basically my attitude is, I personally want to be a pacifist, but I'm grateful for the fact that we have others who are able to not have that quality, where, you know, soldiers, police officers who are willing to take down somebody who is going to murder other people.
Right.
Like we need, in society, we need to have people who are willing to take a life in the name of protecting innocent people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. You bring up a great point there, in that should, at the very least, it should have been to murder someone rather than to kill someone.
Yeah,
And
but
that, yeah,
he even, like, would it even be like, even if you say that it's murder to kill Olaf, because okay, it's not the state doing it, but the state won't do their job. So
right,
before then, they kind of had the opportunity when they thought that they had captured him in the Vile Village, and they're like, well, we can't kill him. Like,
right.
we can't do that. And you get this in chapter 13 of, like, we have to be different than Olaf. And I'm like, then you
Mhm.
want more people to die, or maybe you don't want it, but by making that choice, more people will die. And that's not actually taking the moral high ground. That's being a coward. You
Right.
need to be able to, like, it's juvenile, it's a course in ethics, but it's a juvenile explanation of ethics,
Mhm.
and ethics is more complex than that, and it
Right.
is uncomfortable. And I just wish that if these books really were so serious and, like, ooh, I'm gonna, like, present you themes that are more grown up than you might be ready for, then he wouldn't be afraid to get into the complexity of it.
Right. I do think that there is, you had mentioned it being juvenile, and that this is Klaus who's speaking, and I
Yeah.
know that it is, um, it can be attributed to, Lemony Snicket or Daniel Handler,
Yeah.
but the fact that it is Klaus allows a certain level of distance, and I think that there is, as you had mentioned with, chapter 13, there is a certain level of the children are, they need to realize that there is, um, that sometimes you need to do bad things in order to create good
Yes.
overall. And
Yes.
that this series is actually them kind of having to learn that the hard way. Um,
Yes. It
yeah,
is them learning it the hard way. I guess what I'm saying is that they seem to, kids have much more of, I guess kids do have more of a black and white sense of right and wrong, and then you do deal with, like, the shades of gray and the complexity of it as you do get older, and you realize that issues are more nuanced than you might initially think, or the way you want the world to be, but the way the world actually is. So I guess I'm open to that if that's the case. But children are, like, he's also acting as though he is the more mature one in this instance, and
right.
that's actually the immature approach to ethics.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
but I get it, that he is a kid, that he is a
Mhm.
kid, and that he, it's just, it's that would be where, if I were reading this with a group of kids, I would ask that question: do you think Klaus is right? But
Right.
we don't ever have any doubt introduced to that. There's no discourse here. There's
Yeah,
not Violet who's debating, or some older character in the book who's saying, no, 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 no. It's maybe more complex. You know, if you don't kill him, then
Right.
what's going to happen? Because Olaf continues to murder people. So, all right, that was it for chapter 12 for me.
Okay. I had one more note, and hopefully this won't be a whole discussion, but on page 224, in the second paragraph there, Klaus steered the gurney in that direction and rode past Olaf's fat associate, who looked like neither a man nor a woman, who was still dressed as a spurious guard. With a terrible roar, it began to give chase, walking in huge, lumbering steps. Uh, yeah, there's one other instance in these chapters where the associate who looks like neither a man nor a woman is referred to as an it, which is problematic and has actually been has stirred some controversy.
Oh, has it?
Yeah.
You looked this up? Because
I
we
did.
talked about this at length before, and I was saying I can't believe that this is not controversial.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the very least, this instance is seen as has stirred some controversy.
Why this, but not the one before that we talked about?
I don't know. I don't know if maybe it's because the books were more popular by this point.
Right, and
or
people just had not reread.
Yeah.
Which one? What was it?
The Wide Window.
Yeah, that's what I
book.
thought. I
Yeah.
thought so.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was my note there, which is there are a couple instances in this book where he does refer to a person as it, and that is, yeah.
And even that is complex too, because I know that there are some trans people who actually prefer the term it. So,
Right.
And I want to kind of like address that, like, because in the last time that we talked about that, then I said, like, you know, that's dehumanizing. But then there are, and I know that there legitimately are some trans people who prefer the term it, but there's plenty of others who don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the most common one that trans people prefer is they.
Yeah, they.
Or whatever identity they do, or whatever gender they do identify with.
And then there's the non-binary ones like Zay and Zur. And
right.
I know there's others as well. But yeah, the other thing that I wanted to mention with that section, though, and this is just brief, where he's got the word spurious in there.
Mm-hmm.
And have you not noticed that this word comes up again and again in this book when he could put
Yes,
in ersatz? And ersatz is nowhere to be found, but spurious is all over this book. And I'm just like, is this the Spurious Hospital? And why were you in love with ersatz, and now ersatz has disappeared, and you've just replaced it with spurious? And I don't even think that he ever defined spurious, which is, I'm fine with that, because then it forces kids to look it up. But I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, I think maybe he did. It might have been in the previous set of chapters, but yeah, regardless, he does use it a lot.
A lot in this book. And it's so weird. I'm going, what happened to ersatz, dude?
Yeah.
You only use that word like 30 times in the ersatz elevator.
Yep.
Why don't you go first with chapter 13?
Sure. All right. Yeah, so my first note is on page 241. And this, as we had kind of mentioned before, is a section where the Baudelaires are reflecting on them being similar to Count Olaf in some ways. So Violet says, it worked. Violet said, we fooled them. We're as good at tricking people as Olaf is. And at disguises, Klaus said. Anagrams, Sunny said. And lying to people, Violet said, thinking of Hal and the shopkeeper at Last Chance General Store and all the volunteers fighting disease. Maybe we're becoming villains after all. Don't say that, Klaus said. We're not villains, we're good people. We had to do tricky things in order to save our lives. Olaf has to do tricky things, Violet said, to save his life. Different, Sunny said. Maybe it's not different, Violet said sadly. Maybe, and then they're interrupted. And Klaus, says we can discuss this later. This is really where it's where they are starting to explore the idea of, this gray area of maybe it's not as simple as, Count Olaf is the villain and we're the heroes. Maybe there's something to Olaf's backstory that we don't know, uh, that, triggered this in him. Maybe he, I don't know, yeah, maybe he has some reasons that they just don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's at least a discourse, which is what I was asking for
Yeah,
before. They're at least engaging with this idea of, oh, we've been taking the moral high ground in every instance, and we won't ever do anything wrong. And that's what's so irritating about these kids, at least for me, is it's just they are perfect. They are perfect kids who are, they can do no wrong, make no mistakes. They have got every skill imaginable. I mean, I guess I've not used the terms yet, but like the Mary Sue, and I don't know what it is for a dude.
Gary Stew.
What is it?
Gary Stew.
Gary Stew. Yeah, I mean, like, there, and it's fine because I genuinely don't have an issue with that because
Right.
it's not like they're supposed to be representing reality exactly as it is.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to be kind of silly.
Yeah.
But that where I get irritated is if there's no flaws in our protagonists, they're boring.
Right.
If they have no weaknesses, and if they never are getting into confusing ethical territory, or there's a little bit of self-doubt or whatever, if they're just they are victims who are continually victimized, but they are plucky enough to be able to get themselves out of any situation, then it's so cartoonish
Yeah.
that you can't have it both ways, where you also try to then get into somewhat deep themes at times, and
Yeah.
these profundities that Handler strives for at times. So I like the fact that they have a discussion about it, but it's still a really shallow discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fair. All right. I'm going to skip over one of my other notes for the time being. Page 248. Let me see. Uh, this is from Klaus. Stay down, Klaus said, dropping to the ground and beginning to crawl. In the Encyclopedia of Escaping Arson, the author wrote that there's more oxygen closer to the ground so we can breathe more easily, but we need to get to some kind of shelter right away. So my question is, where did he read the Encyclopedia of Escaping Arson? It would certainly, it would certainly be my assumption that the only place he would come across that book would be in his parents' library, in the Baudelaire mansion.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there was a tunnel under the house.
Right.
House burned to the ground. There's a possible survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, you have this reference to the Encyclopedia of Escaping Arson, where Klaus reads like essentially all of the ways, an encyclopedia of ways to escape from arson.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good observation. Well done. I did not catch that.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So my next note is on page 151.
151. 251?
Sorry, yes, 251. My apologies. uh, yeah, so this is just I know that you okay, yeah, I'm just going to read the paragraph that starts at the top of the page. We're not going to wait around to find out if that fool lived or died, Olaf snarled. As soon as the ladies can put the costumes in the trunk, we'll get out of here. It's been splendid setting this fire, but we've got to find the Snicket file as soon as possible before you know who does. So confirmed, Voldemort is part of the
Right.
series of unfortunate events. Yeah, and then VFD, as May said with a cackle, the real VFD, that is, not those ridiculous singers. So confirmed that the volunteers fighting disease are not the real VFD, as you had kind of suggested last time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, this reference to before you know who, and then Esme answers with VFD, but it sounds more like he's referring to a specific person.
Uh-huh.
So Yeah, not sure. Yeah, not sure what's going on with that exactly. Who he could be referring to specifically.
You don't
Um,
remember?
I don't remember. No.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah,
Because
I
I'm
mean, I
like,
have
I don't know who this is.
right. I have an idea, but I don't. Yeah, I'm not confident on that. I have a couple ideas, I guess. Um, all right. So hopping back, my last note is here on page 246. Um, this is toward the middle of the page. Um, I do not know where the Baudelaire children are now, or if they are safe, or if they are even alive. But there are some things I do know, and one of them is that the window of the supply closet in the ward for people with nasty rashes of Heimlich Hospital was not on the. Okay, so Lemony Snicket, it says he does not know where the Baudelaire children are now, or if they are safe, or if they are even alive. So why in the previous book did he say that he knows that they never returned to that lake or river or whatever it was? Um, so I think this is just, I guess, confirming that he is not the best writer.
Snicket is not. Whether
Right,
Handler
yes.
is or not. Yeah, like because I'm
Yeah.
not. Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Snicket is definitely inconsistent, and there
Hmm.
are huge sections of this that punish close reading
Right.
instead of rewarding close reading.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole thing with like this is essentially what we're doing with these books. This is a type of close reading that we're doing
Mhm.
where we're pointing out specific passages, looking at direct quotations, thinking about word choice and what that means with theme and character and all of that. And good literature, and this is in case anybody's ever wondered about this, but why do English teachers and English professors choose which literature, which books and poems and plays to study? Uh, Typically, it's because it's something that rewards a close reading, that the more you look at it, the better it gets. And regular old literature, let's call it, right? Not canonical, not with a capital L, and that whole distinction is like it's a complex thing, whether you agree or disagree with it. But regular literature or popular literature doesn't necessarily reward close reading. It's usually more for the plot or for some fun dialogue that you might have, some exciting sequences and passages. But overall, if you really start looking at it closely, then you go, oh, I guess it doesn't get better when I do that.
Right.
It's meant to be read quickly and to speed through it. And parts of these books does reward close reading. I'm not saying that we don't get that. Like some of the references, like as you gave before, like with Nabokov, I thought that was a great thing that we had in there.
Yeah.
And even that whole encyclopedia of escaping arson and then that connecting back to the ersatz elevator, that rewards close reading. And it's like you should pay close attention because if you do, there's a lot of fun that you can get out of it by catching subtle little things that a casual reader will miss.
Yeah.
But instances like this, and you go, then why am I reading so closely?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, he just should not have said that. He just needed another word in that previous book to
Absolutely.
describe that they had not, that as
As
far as
far
he
as
could
I know,
tell,
yeah.
they
There's no indication, no
have
evidence.
never returned.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, not that, they never did, but that they have not.
right.
Um,
It's I think he does things like this where it's it works in the moment and it's
mhm,
a temporary solution that opens up more problems,
right.
right?
Yeah.
That I know, like I mean, a really good example of this and one that I often provide is with Robert Kirkman, who wrote the Walking Dead comic books. Then at one point, then he just thought that it would be like so exciting if he just had the governor chop off Rick's hand.
Yeah.
So then he's like, I did that, and then I was like, oh no, now the dude can't even button his own shirt, and now I'm
Right.
stuck with this thing that I it was going to be an exciting end to one issue of a comic, and I end up having 193, and for something like 160 of them, he's got no hand, and so now it's a big problem because I'm constantly going, wait, Rick can't pick that up. He's only got one hand. And so it's like it works so well in the moment, but then long term he's like, I didn't think it through. And I think that's what we're getting at times here, where in that passage in the austere academy, then it makes it seem like, oh no, this is going to end in tragedy. And he's like, yeah. So then readers will read this and they'll be like, oh, that's so sad. They never go back there again. It's like, but by saying it that way, you're now inserting yourself chronologically into this place of after the Baudelaire's death, because you're saying it with certainty. And I don't think you know what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it certainly does seem to be, at the very least, inconsistent.
Yes, exactly. It is. And I mean, Snicket is inconsistent in a lot of different ways, but with that stuff, then it's like, then why are we trusting you for anything? Because if you get too many inconsistencies, then it's no longer him documenting the story of the Baudelaires. Then it's just, well, you're just inventing all of this, aren't you? Because we don't know what happened, what didn't happen. And,
all right, but yeah, those were my only notes for chapter 13.
Okay, I've only got one more, so this is at the top of page 245. I guess I'll start from the bottom of 244. So basically, they're having this argument over escaping the closet and whether they go one person at a time or whether all three of them go at once. And so this is like, I've been begging for this. I want the kids to debate, not to have not to fight, but to, vehemently disagree on key issues. And this is where you actually get a disagreement, because that's where you get conflict, and conflict ends up being more interesting than harmony. Like, it just is more interesting to read about conflict than no conflict. So Klaus is insisting that they can't separate, and Violet's like, yeah, but I don't know if my rubber band device is going to hold all three of us, so we should go one at a time. So then at the bottom of 244, Klaus says, we're not leaving anyone behind. Klaus said firmly, that's what makes us different from Olaf. Violet thought for a moment and nodded. You're right, she said. Okay, my question is, I'm sorry, what? What makes you different from Olaf? The fact that you don't leave anyone behind? Because while Olaf does leave someone behind at the end of this book, when have we ever seen him leave somebody behind before?
Right. Yep. That's it's a very good point. And also, just from a logical point of view, go one at a time to make sure that you all survive.
I know. I'm like, I don't even understand how that makes you different from Olaf. It's going, I want to do something reckless that might kill all three of us. That's what makes us different from Olaf. And it's like, what? The fact that you want all three of you to potentially die and he only wants 2 out of 3 of you to die? Yeah. That's what makes you different? So if we go one person might get down safely and then the other 2 might die, or because the thing, I don't understand what he's saying. I honestly don't understand that. What makes you different? I want to slap Klaus multiple times from these chapters. He's so irritating. It's with his moral high ground, this moralizing, and it's fine if he moralizes and he's right, but when he moralizes and he's wrong, what's more irritating than somebody who takes the moral high ground, but they're really wrong? You're like, stop it. You're not even right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't even have a defense or anything. It's just, I don't know why. I mean, I know why that's in here, because, they start to discuss this, whole thing about, oh, maybe we're as bad as Olaf, and this is a moment where, Handler or, Lemony Snicket or whatever can put in that, oh, see, they are still able to differentiate themselves. But it's yeah, but it doesn't work.
No. I'm fine-ish with this, distinction that they're trying to make between what they are willing to do and what Olaf is willing to do. But this is not even a bad example. It's not relevant at all. There's no connection here between anything of this is what separates us from Olaf. I'm like, what? The fact that you guys are thinking we want to save all 3 of us. So if we leave 2 people behind, they might die from smoke inhalation. So we maybe all 3 need to go right now at the risk that all 3 of us could die in the crash if this thing breaks. You know what I mean? So it's ooh, well, what's the more prudent thing to do and what's going to keep us safe. But they both want to keep them, all three of them, alive.
Right.
So I'm like, but that's like, there's nothing here that separates your two options of all at once or one at a time. Neither one of those is what Olaf would do. Olaf would throw all three of you out the window without the rope at all. Like,
Right.
who suggested that? Did Violet say, like, hey, we should just jump without even using this thing?
Right.
No, what separates us from Olaf is that we don't want to die. Like, I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think that this should have been that Klaus should have referenced earlier in the story when Violet made Klaus and Sunny leave her behind. She ended up on an operating table, almost getting her head cut off.
Yeah.
That if he had brought that up and been like, we're not leaving each other, alone again. Like,
yes,
we are going everywhere together because that is just, it's too dangerous to leave one of us separate from the others.
Exactly.
That
would
would have
have
been fine.
made sense without any reference to what separates them from Olaf.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm going, the only thing that I can think is that Olaf is known for leaving henchmen behind, and he doesn't care if they live or die. Which, number one, a henchman is not the same thing as a family member, a sibling, so that still wouldn't be a good connection. And second of all, we haven't seen Olaf do that until like several minutes after this in the books. Right. So how would Klaus know that Olaf does that? Because they overhear Olaf say that, unless Handler just got totally mixed up when he was writing this, and he thought that happened after, or that happened before Klaus said this. That they overheard Olaf say, "Oh, I don't care about that person. Let's abandon them."
Right. Yeah. Or that the fact that other associate is still in the building when everybody else has left, but they don't know that he's left yet.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Unless it's just Snicket is such a terrible writer that he got mixed up, so then he gets Klaus to say something that Klaus did not say, which then belies the fact that Snicket has been insisting that he is accurately documenting everything. And when he doesn't know, then he says, I don't know what happened here, but I know that they said exactly this, and they said exactly this, and this is exactly how it played out. Yeah. But now we can start questioning the entire thing, and the whole thing unravels as soon as you do that.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. All right.
I didn't mean to end on a negative note.
No, that's fine. We will be moving on to book the 9th, The Carnivorous Carnival.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm a sucker for anything to do with carnivals. I am.
Okay. And we do get the letter to the editor at the end, which is all torn to shreds. I like that. Again, we had mentioned this before where it was, the telegram, and it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of fun and it's different. And now it's getting, you can't even read all the words, which is
right.
Fun. So
this one is even more of a tease.
Yes.
Than the other ones, as a tease, it's so irritating because he's like, I can't quite tell you. Ooh, let me hint at stuff, but I won't tell you. But with this, when we've only got a fragment of it, then it works so much better as a tease because it's like, oh, he maybe said something really significant, but it didn't survive, so we only get to see little bits of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, so we will be heading into the Carnivorous Carnival.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So chapters 1 to 4 for next week.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the tattoo! A phrase here which means like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast across the web. That may seem like a strange definition, but in this context, it is entirely accurate.